Serious. What happened in your this is not a drill moment during work, school etc. I live in a small condo complex that backs up against a major highway, separated by a tall barrier that's part concrete, part decorative wood. So it's like 5 AM and I'm dead asleep and the house shakes. I roll over, thinking man, someone set off fireworks way too late in the night. I'm barely asleep again, and it shakes. This time I hear the boom and I'm like, frick those firework loving kids. Well, I'm awake. Might as well use the bathroom. So I'm in the bathroom, and the house shakes again. Boom. Ha. So I look out the back window, and there's an inferno just past the backyard, right where the lawn meets the barrier. Oh, and this is right after all those people burned to death in their houses in CA. Nope. Wake up the husband, shove the cat in the carrier, grab your wallet, get in the car and leave. The only exit from the complex is right past the inferno, but we make it okay. The cats pee. The husband doesn't see what the big deal is. He's still mostly asleep. And I'm like, where can we go watch the news in our pajamas? So at the neighborhood Starbucks we're watching on our phones. The local fire department hosing down our condos with fireproof foam. A gas tanker caught fire and pulled over. Then the 3 compartments caught fire individually. The driver made it out. Our place was fine. And now I have a go bag. Just in case. A go bag is a good idea. Thanks. I think I will move a cat carrier from the garage into the house now. I was at a movie theater. One of the big ones with 12 screens. Halfway through the movie an alarm goes off and no one really reacts. And then a recorded voice advising that an emergency situation has arisen and we are to vacate the area immediately. 12 screens emptying simultaneously into the foyer created havoc. Some minor crush injuries. People falling and tripping others. It was chaos. Kids screaming. Parents trying to get in to find their kids. 5 minutes later and we are still inching towards the doors. And a real voice comes on and advises it was a false alarm and to go back and they will restart the movies. Important lesson from this for everyone. If you need to evacuate from a movie theater, take the exit near the screen that goes straight out of the building. And not the one that goes back to the foyer. This is a really big issue with emergency evacuations. People subconsciously head for the door they came in, often ignoring emergency exits which are much closer. I was at a conference last year that had a false alarm and evacuation and the vast majority of people stampeded for the front door, right past the emergency exits. I was in the high school gym donating blood when the alarm for an active shooter lockdown went off. The doors were quickly locked and people were told to remain calm and duck under tables, but those of us giving blood and hooked up to the machines had to stay in place. It turned out to be that a few young men had stolen a car and had driven it recklessly onto school property. A police helicopter had somehow gotten involved which sparked the panic. There were no guns involved, thank goodness. But it definitely was not a good first time donating blood experience. Terrible as it is, I just imagined you getting shot and turning to the blood donation people like, hey I need that back. We were all in psychophysiopatho class when the alarm bell rang. It's a class where the whole lot of us are divided in random 20-25 people group of students. I didn't know any of the people in this group very well, but we were polite to each other. The teacher said no drill was supposed to take place, so we all raced the best we could outside. Except I was in crutches at the time, and the building we were in was old and had a lot of stairs. I was lagging behind, getting more and more scared that I would be left alone. Our teacher was already out, and the bulk of the group was far ahead, and I had no friends in here to make sure I was safe. But 4 of my classmates, all girls, noticed I was struggling and doubled back to help me. It could have been any kind of danger, a fire, a dumbass with a weapon, but they didn't hesitate 1 second once they saw me. One of them took my med bag, another took my crutches, the other 2 put my arms around their shoulders and half pushed me out, half carried me out. I was viewing a traveling exhibit about the Titanic. When you entered the exhibit, you were given a ticket which had the name of an actual person aboard the Titanic. At the end you would get to see if they survived or not. Right as we finished seeing if our person lived or died, the fire alarm went off in the museum. The exhibit staff ushered everyone into the staff area behind the exhibit and down the emergency stairs. Everything was lit with emergency lighting only and really cramped, and after having just been in the exhibit you really felt like you were escaping a sinking ship. Probably the most surreal emergency I've ever experienced. Yes, my person did survive. They tried to match your person as close to you as possible. I was a kid at the time, so my person was a child. Much higher chance of surviving if you were a kid or a woman. I was taking the SAT. We were maybe 30 minutes into the writing section when the fire alarm goes off. Some guy started a fire in the computer lab of the building because he didn't bring proper ID and they wouldn't let him take his test. We had to sit outside for 3 hours in silence before they decided, never mind, you guys have to retake this in a month. Certified bruh moment. Kid brought a gun to school. He wanted to show it off and pulled it out at lunch. Yeah, you're not supposed to freaking do that. He got expelled, was relieved of any actual criminal charges on account of no bullets were brought and he was so young. But everyone dipped from the lunchroom and all the other classes got locked down. I remember being in class when it happened, and not one of us thought it was real because our school did a drill every quarter for that crap and it was like midway through one of them. This was 8th grade. I wonder whether that has ever been used as an attack vector by an insider. Find out when a drill is due to take place and commit an actual attack at the time. When I was in school, about 20 years ago I think, we had a bomb threat. They evacuated the entire school out to the baseball fields for hours before they let us go home early. The very next day, we went back to school and they kept us locked in our classrooms for hours while the bomb squad removed bomb material, from what I was told, from the very baseball fields that they had made us wait on the day before. 1. Tornado hit our house. We heard the sirens. My dad and I woke up my mom and brother and we barely made it to the basement before it hit. 2. Active shooter outside my job. It was some young kid who was running around and waving a gun around like it was some toy. He tried to get into the store I worked at, but fortunately, I had already locked them because it was closing time. I had my employees hide in the fridge while I called 911. Last period of the day in middle school, we get told over the intercom to remain in our classes. Then another announcements for controlled class by class evacuation. Turns out someone had mailed the school white powder saying it was anthrax and they were not sure how far it might have spread from the office. The school was closed the next day and it made the news, but luckily it was not actually anthrax. It was just at home, but I think it was May 2019. We're about to leave for a funeral and there was a sudden earthquake. I think it was a 6 and it was surreal as it was the strongest earthquake I felt. We took shelter under door frames and nobody was hurt, gladly. Earthquakes are so scary. I haven't felt a 6 but I have felt some 5.6s and 5.8s. I always freeze on the spot. I can't get my body to move. I was in 10th grade, age 15 for non-Americans, when 9/11 happened. It's hard to explain to those who didn't live through it how much the world changed literally in a day, and how while there was internet there weren't smartphones or social media, so news traveled less instantaneously. For us, we were called out of class to go to an assembly and we were all joking around because our school had a way of over-dramatizing random admin things that didn't really matter, of the "we are searching for a new vice principal" variety. I probably still had a wisecrack grin on my face as the head of school said they all wanted us to be together to hear this news. Then she said the World Trade Center has been attacked, which was where my cousin worked, and I remember the room literally looked different. We were all watching TV screens less than an hour later as the second tower fell, and we got a local breaking news about a plane crash outside Pittsburgh, which is quite the thing when your school is in Pittsburgh, and you think it was heading for us, because no one knew until many days later where the 4th plane was heading. Heck, we didn't even know there were only 4. So yeah, that moment with the World Trade Center has been attacked and how the room looked different, literally and figuratively. I will never forget that. Was showing a documentary to my class about the second week of the semester when the president of the college came on the loudspeaker to tell us to shelter in place. Somebody had tweeted pictures of his gun saying he wanted to light up the library, and when the FBI pinged his phone, he was on my campus. My classroom was directly above the library. We all knew this because of our smartphones. This was right before lunch. I was escorted out of the building around dinner time. Turned out the student was bluffing. He was visiting our campus that day with his high school. Frick him. That doesn't sound like much of a documentary. School had to evacuate cause of a fire. It was put out before it got serious, but it turns out the DT technician accidentally started an actual fire and we were outside for ages. Wasn't a big fire at all, but was still surprising something actually happened. Similar thing happened at my school, but it was a science technician. My college dorm had to evacuate because of fire. Some girl was making a toast at 4 AM and the toaster caught fire. No serious damage was caused and firemen came pretty quickly, but being woken up by fire alarms, seeing everybody panicking and then having to wait outside for like 2 hours in December was not fun. Imagine messing up making toast. There was a shelter-in-place tornado warning. It was on that day that we learned our school had a bomb shelter below the pool locker rooms and it was some Cold War crap. Damp concrete walls, doors with small round windows, and the lights were those old oval shaped with a metal cage like what you'd see on a submarine. Even had safety posters circa 1960 to 1970s. Whoa, your school actually had a pool on the 3rd floor. Nice. There was an earthquake. It was not that strong, but it was still an earthquake. Everyone was treating it as a drill, which meant talking and talking and talking until our advisor said that it was not a drill and everyone started panicking. Good times. Last November half my school burnt down. Everybody thought it was just another drill until we got outside and began to smell smoke. There was a mad panic as all 1,300 students were registered and registered again until we knew everyone was out. The worst part was it was started by 2 first-year students. My dad was a firefighter. He was casually watching Titanic at the theater. You know when this happened then? Out of nowhere during the movie, projectors stopped. All lights shut down and some guy opened the door of the theater and told everyone to get out. There was a fire. As my dad walked out, his firefighter senses were triggered. He felt the draft of air being sucked out of the theater room, going into the main hall. Fire alarm couldn't be heard from inside because the volume of the movie was so loud. Everyone got out. It was a big complex with restaurants and bars next to the cinema. Everything burned down. Millions dollars of damages. It was a teenager playing with matches while smoking behind dumpsters. My dad had to wait for the double VHS to be released to know how Titanic ended. That's the best part of this story happening in the 20th century. It was in 1998. We had someone fall off a boat down at the boat launch when I worked at a campground. She hit her head on the dock and started sinking while unconscious. Luckily her BF dove in and grabbed her before she drowned. However, she was incoherent, so we had to immobilize, warm her up in a truck, then call in a heli to take her to the nearest hospital. It was crazy. We had to mark a landing zone and lay down some flares and everything. School had a lockdown. Was coming back from lunch and saw a bunch of cops. Asked one what's up and was told someone had reported a gun in the building and it's on lockdown. I went home. Found out the next day kid had a BB gun in his backpack and I guess pee off a friend who then told the office what he had. Side note, the group that kid would run with was known for starting fights with people over nothing. So I guess karma is a B. It was woodwork and in my classes we have a dust collector connected to an automatic sander and a nail happened to get sanded and made sparks to fine wood chips, so it exploded in fire in a woodwork building. In our shop class in high school we had one of those vacuum systems that collected throughout the whole room and some sparks from a saw ended up setting the entire thing on fire. We were quickly evacuated and the shop was shut down for a few weeks, but I still felt like those big hoses or whatever they are called running all up the walls and across the ceiling should really be more fireproof. I was still working as a hostess and we had just opened up. In the morning we usually only have 3 servers on the floor for the first 30 or so minutes. 5-6 families immediately walk in, which is good for the openers. Everybody gets 2 tables to start. I was seating the last of the families when I heard a horrible wail from the back. I honestly didn't think anything of it first, until I realized 2 of the 3 servers hadn't come out front to greet their tables. One of the servers, while switching out the tea bags, scalded herself across the face with boiling water. The second server was already calling paramedics and trying to keep her calm while she went into shock. So now I had 1 server for 6 tables. About half of them were intensely understanding, but one freaking family was giving me max attitude. I finally snapped at the wife and said, "Mom, the server in charge of your section just suffered 3rd-degree burns across her face. If you're in such a rush that you cannot wait for emergency crews to get here, I would be more than happy to suggest other establishments that can accommodate you. Right at that moment, the EMTs arrived. 6 huge Captain America stunt doubles finagling the gunny through the restaurant. She shut right the frick up. The server ended up being okay and didn't have any permanent scars, but for the rest of the day I was jittery from the adrenaline rush. We were in home economics cooking stir fry and the girl opposite me and her partner turned their stove up too high and set fire to the oil in the wok. Our teacher was at the other side of the class and didn't even notice, but then she was not very observant and half deaf. The girls and my partner started screaming and freaking out. I told them to turn off the stove and set the pan on the table, but they didn't listen and one of them panicked and put the pan in their sink. She put a pan of burning oil in a sink full of water. Needless to say, it got worse and chaos ensued. The alarm went off. Our teacher finally noticed the screaming and proceeded to berate us. School was evacuated and the fire department came. Luckily no one was hurt, but the girls tried to put the blame on me, saying I told them to put the pan in the sink, but some of my classmates backed me up. Never trust a half-deaf girl teacher. Not when I was a student, but back in mid-April, a couple days before the quarantine, we had an active shooter lockdown at the elementary school I work at. It was a normal day. Kids were doing their normal stuff at lunch recess. Staff notice a few police cars around what is usually a very safe and quiet area, but just brush it off. Suddenly our secretary tells us over our walkie-talkies that the police have called and ordered us to lock down the school. Immediate activity. Honestly, we don't ever practice for this scenario happening at recess, so I'm amazed it went as well as it did. We are also a high-needs school, with a lot of behavioral issues, and even on a good day getting all the kids inside after recess is difficult. The secretary sounded the bell ending recess and staff started ushering kids inside. At the same time as around 10 police cars showed up on the surrounding streets. The kids were really confused because they normally line up and wait for their teacher, but we were telling them to go in and just go to their classrooms. Their teachers are waiting. I'm guessing the difficult kids realized something was up because none of them gave us any issue and just did as told. We ended up in lockdown with the kids sitting quietly and all doors closed for about 40 minutes, listening to cops outside and sirens and stuff. The kids from kindergarten up did amazing. One of my co-workers shoved about 12 kids in the special needs bathroom and was stuck there for 40 minutes with them because a cop came by the outside door and yelled at her to get them out of view. Turns out in the nearby downtown core of my city there had been a shooting. Very rare here. And the guy took off up our way. Last he had been seen was on the side street next to the school, and someone told cops he was trying to get into the school. They caught him a few blocks away, but it was a really intense hour for us. My freshman year in high school, we were suddenly told during our OTC to run inside and get in the closet with no explanation. Lights off and the higher ranking cadets readied ropes to use to get us down 2 stories by the window. Some were prepared to grab the air rifles. I knew this wasn't a drill when the sergeants wouldn't tell us what was going on. Everyone became suddenly terrified we were going to be killed one by one. Despite being in the safest spot on campus, we found out the next day someone had brought a gun on campus. They also brought dogs on campus and arrested many kids with weed on them while they investigated the gun issue. A second lockdown happened similarly. We were rounded into the buildings and hidden since someone was murdered up the street. That one wasn't too scary though. Once someone pulled the fire alarm to avoid a test, but a cooking class had left stuff in the ovens which then set them off again. We got to miss a full hour. That happened at my school, except the alarm was pulled 7 times in one day. Freshman year, there was a student walking to school in the morning, and just a few feet off campus were some guys who weren't students blasting their crappy rap music. The student asked these guys to turn their music down. The guys said sure, and the student started walking away, and as soon as his back was turned they shot him. I was in the pay locker room when they put us into lockdown, and there was a lot of confusion about what was happening. Finally, after 2 hours of being in lockdown, the police determined there wasn't a hostile shooter on campus and they gave us the option to go home if a parent signed us out, or go to class. I went home. My sister stayed but said nobody did any actual work. The student was airlifted to the hospital and made a full recovery. So did they catch the guys? I work at a large international airport pre-security. One day I was helping some upset customers and just trying to get them out of my store when we heard gunshots and I looked up to see people screaming and running. I motioned the customers into the storage closet that's disguised behind a mirror. We could still hear running and yelling and then I heard people come into my store and were trying to hide behind the counter. I opened my closet door and motioned them inside. I had around 10 people shoved into like a 10x4 space with all of my back stock and shelving too. My manager called me asking if I was okay and said he was stuck behind security and the airport had shut down all the trams so he couldn't get up to me but to stay safe. Eventually we got the all clear to get up and head out. Luckily it turned out the guy only had a corkscrew but someone in the tsar line just yelled he had a gun and started the panic. What the gunshots were? It was the guy being tasered. He was trying to bypass security and was being belligerent, which was why security and the cops were with him, but once that random person yelled gun, it created a panic. Thank you for being a decent human and not hanging those other folks out to dry during an intense situation. Was doing a chemistry practical test when the fire alarm went off. The head of science came in, said continue your work. It's just a drill. So we kept going. 2 minutes later the head came back and said sorry, there actually is a fire. Wasn't a big one, but still LOL. I once worked in a law firm. They got a bomb threat and we were evacuated from the building. Did I mention that it was my first day in there? 8th grade. There was a code red for a firearm on campus. My whole class was freaked out. Teacher had us follow protocol and move to the back of the class and turn the lights off. Within 60 seconds the principal bursts through the door with 3 deputies and immediately goes over to a random classmate of mine and yells, "Where is IT?" The kid pulls out a $10 BB gun and is then promptly escorted out. He was expelled from the school system for 2 years. He had been showing it off to other students the entire day, thus that is how he got caught. Was running program at a summer camp when our fire siren went on, but it only lasted about 2 seconds. Instead of the normal few minutes, so I assumed nothing. Then the radio came on that there was a fire, not a drill. Immediately sent my staff that way and my campers back to their sites, secured my area and then bolted, passed my staff along with a few others on my way to the gathering point, only to be stopped at our main pavilion. Apparently the fire was already out, so they cancelled everything instead of running it out. Turns out it was an electrical fire and the siren lost power. We then decided that we should investigate that being on a battery backup. When I was a first year teacher on the 8th day of school year, one of my 3rd graders came with a black eye and burned cheek, didn't want to talk about it. She got incredibly upset and she ended up telling me what had happened between her and her mom. I had to call down to the office to get someone to cover my class so I could run and tell admin. In a teacher prep program you are told about these situations but it doesn't feel real when it happens. Nothing can prepare you. As a current first year teacher, I can confirm that nothing can prepare you for the things kids confess to you or the things you have to tell admin. I worry about my students 24/7, especially now that we've been teaching remotely due to COVID-19. In my school we often have bomb threats. Since 8th grade, we've had 3 or 4 threats and I'm in 11th grade now. Obviously none of them have been real but we had to evacuate each time. Some of the times we just went home. Some of the times we didn't. I think our school is starting to get lazy about bomb threats because during the last one we had, they put everyone in the gym and then sent everybody back to class after. I only call it lazy because all it takes is just a little intellect from someone who's really placing bombs to outlast the police, firefighters, etc. who investigate the situation and then the bombs go off when we're in class or when we're in the gym. Weird thing is, my school isn't in a sketchy place or anything. We live in the suburbs of southern New Hampshire and our town is rather wealthy. The school is pretty big for a suburb though. I think bomb threats are more of a trend than anything that is passed down class by class, or year by year, just because it happens so often. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.